Frank Sinatra begged Dean Martin to save his marriage. Dean's response? Destroyed him. The phone rang at 3 in the morning. Not unusual for Dean Martin, who kept the hours of a vampire and the friendships of a king. But this wasn't a party invitation or a golf date. This was the sound of a desperate man calling his closest friend in the darkest hour of his life. Frank Sinatra, the chairman of the board, the man who owned Las Vegas and commanded respect from presidents and mobsters alike, was crying into the phone like a lost child. And Dean Martin, the king of cool, was about to deliver the cruelest blow of their 40-year friendship. It was October 15th, 1966. The newspapers had been brutal for weeks, their headlines screaming across every newsstand in America. Sinatra marriage in crisis. Mia and Frank, is it over? The 21-year-old actress had walked out on the 51-year-old crooner, and Hollywood was feeding on the carcass of their doomed romance like vultures. But what the papers didn't know, what the gossip columnists couldn't report, was that Frank Sinatra was coming apart at the seams. The man who had built an empire on confidence was crumbling. Dean answered the phone in his Beverly Hills mansion, expecting Frank's usual late-night antics. Instead, he heard something that chilled him to the bone: vulnerability. Frank Sinatra didn't do vulnerable. Frank Sinatra was steel wrapped in silk, concrete dressed in a tuxedo. But tonight, he was broken. "Dino," Frank's voice was thick with whiskey and tears. "I need you, Polly. I really need you." Dean sat up in bed, instantly alert. In 40 years of friendship, he had never heard Frank sound like this. "What's wrong, Frank?" "She's gone, Dino. Mia's really gone this time. She took her clothes, her jewelry, everything. Left me a note like I'm some kind of stranger." Dean rubbed his eyes and reached for his cigarettes. He'd seen this before. Frank fell hard and fast, and when it ended, he fell harder. "Frank, you've been through this before. Remember Ava? You survived that." "This is different." Frank's voice cracked. "This is different because I thought, God, Dino, I thought she might actually love me for me. Not the fame, not the money, not the connections. Just me." Dean took a long drag of his Lucky Strike. He knew better. Mia Farrow had married Frank Sinatra for the same reason every woman married Frank Sinatra: because he was Frank Sinatra. The idea that a 21-year-old actress would fall for a 51-year-old man purely out of love was fantasy, and Frank was smart enough to know it. But love makes fools of even the wisest men. "What do you want me to do, Frank?" "I want you to talk to her. She respects you. She thinks you're the only honest one in our group. If you tell her I can change, if you tell her I love her, maybe she'll listen." Dean's jaw tightened. This was exactly the kind of melodrama he despised about Frank. The endless neediness. The constant drama. The way Frank expected everyone to drop everything and fix his problems. "Frank, I'm not getting in the middle of your marriage. Please, Dino, I'm begging you. I'll do anything." There it was. The word that changed everything. Begging. Frank Sinatra was begging Dean Martin to save his marriage to a girl who was closer in age to Dean's daughter than to Frank. It was pathetic, and Dean felt something ugly stirring in his chest. Something that had been growing for years, but had never been allowed to surface. "Frank, listen to me very carefully." Dean's voice was calm, measured. "You want to know what I think?" "Yeah, I want to know." "I think you made your bed, and now you need to lie in it." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Frank had expected comfort, support, maybe even a plan. He hadn't expected his best friend to turn him away in his darkest hour. "What did you say?" Dean stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the lights of Los Angeles. "You heard me, Frank. You made your bed. You married a girl who's young enough to be your daughter. You paraded her around like a trophy. You tried to control her, mold her into your perfect little wife, and now you're surprised that she ran? Dino, I love her. No, Frank, you love the idea of her. You love having something young and beautiful on your arm. You love the way other men look at you when you walk into a room with her. But love her? Real love? You don't even know what that means. Frank was crying now, openly sobbing into the phone. How can you say that to me? We're brothers. Dean felt no sympathy, only a cold, clinical clarity that had been building for decades. Brothers don't ask brothers to clean up their messes, Frank. Brothers don't call at 3 in the morning expecting miracles. I've always been there for you. Have you? Dean's voice was getting colder. Or have I always been there for you? When you needed muscle for your mob friends, who did you call? When you needed someone to make you look good on stage, who did you call? When you needed someone to babysit your ego, who did you call? Frank was stunned into silence. This wasn't the Dean he knew. This wasn't the loyal sidekick who always had his back. Dean, what's gotten into you? Nothing's gotten into me, Frank. I'm just tired. Tired of being your emotional crutch. Tired of watching you destroy yourself over women who are obviously using you. And most of all, I'm tired of pretending that your problems are my problems. But we're the Rat Pack. We stick together. Dean laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound. The Rat Pack? Frank, the Rat Pack is a publicity stunt. It's a marketing gimmick to sell records and movie tickets. It's not real brotherhood. Real brothers don't use each other. Frank was hyperventilating now. I can't believe you're saying this to me. Someone needs to say it. You want to know why Mia left? Because she figured out what I figured out a long time ago. You don't love people, Frank. You collect them. You add them to your entourage like they're accessories. And when they stop being useful, or when they stop feeding your ego, you discard them. That's not true, isn't it? What happened to all your other wives? What happened to all the friends who didn't kiss your ring? You threw them away, Frank, just like Mia threw you away. The line went quiet, except for Frank's ragged breathing. Dean could picture him sitting in his Malibu mansion, alone, surrounded by all the trappings of success, but empty inside. I thought you were my friend, Frank whispered. I was your friend, Frank. For 40 years I was your friend. I stood by you through the mob connections, the political scandals, the drinking, the violence. I made you look good when you were being an ass. I covered for you when you couldn't cover for yourself. But I'm done. Done with what? Done with you? Frank gasped as if he'd been physically struck. You don't mean that. I mean every word. You want my advice? Stop chasing women who are too young for you. Stop trying to recapture your youth through other people. Grow up. Accept that you're a 51-year-old man who's been married 4 times because you don't know how to love anyone but yourself. Dino, please. And stop calling me Dino. My name is Dean. Dino is a character you created, just like everything else in your life. Dean hung up the phone. He stood there for a moment, listening to the dial tone, feeling something like relief washing over him. For 40 years, he had bitten his tongue, swallowed his pride, and enabled Frank Sinatra's worst impulses. Tonight, he had finally told the truth. Frank called back immediately. Dean didn't answer. Frank called again and again. By the 5th call, Dean unplugged the phone. The next morning, the trades were full of speculation about tension in the Rat Pack. Frank had canceled his appearances at the Sands. Sammy was asking questions. Joey Bishop was trying to play peacemaker. But Dean went about his business as if nothing had happened. He played golf. He had lunch at his favorite restaurant. He attended a recording session. 3 days later, Frank showed up at Dean's house unannounced. He looked terrible. His eyes were red-rimmed and sunken, his hair was disheveled, his clothes were wrinkled like he'd slept in them for days. And he smelled like he'd been drinking for 72 hours straight. This wasn't the impeccable Frank Sinatra the world knew. This was a broken man wearing the mask of a legend. "We need to talk," Frank said when Dean opened the door, his voice hoarse. "I thought I was pretty clear on the phone." Frank pushed past him into the house with the desperation of a drowning man. "You were drunk. You didn't mean what you said." "I wasn't drunk, Frank. I was sober. Maybe for the first time in 40 years. They stood in Dean's living room, surrounded by trophies and photographs of their shared success. Two men who had conquered entertainment together, now staring at each other like strangers on a battlefield. "I came here to apologize," Frank said, "for calling you, for asking you to get involved." "You were right, it wasn't fair." Dean nodded. "Okay. But I also came here to ask you not to throw away 40 years of friendship over one bad night." Dean walked to the bar and poured himself a drink. He didn't offer one to Frank. "Frank, I didn't throw away our friendship. You did. You threw it away every time you treated me like an employee instead of a friend. Every time you expected me to drop everything for your crises. Every time you took me for granted." Frank's face flushed with anger. "I made you, Dean. Without me, you'd still be singing in dive bars in Ohio." There it was. The truth that Frank had been holding back for decades. The belief that Dean Martin owed him everything. Dean smiled, but it was the coldest smile Frank had ever seen. And there's the real Frank Sinatra. Not the vulnerable man on the phone, not the apologetic friend at my door. The Frank who thinks everyone owes him something. "That's not what I meant." "It's exactly what you meant." "And you know what, Frank? You're probably right. Maybe I wouldn't have made it without your help. But I would have been happier." Frank stared at him, not understanding. "What does that mean?" "It means I would have been my own man. I wouldn't have spent 40 years in your shadow, cleaning up your messes, pretending your enemies were my enemies, your friends were my friends. I would have been Dean Martin, not Frank Sinatra's sidekick." "You were never my sidekick. Wasn't I? Every movie, every album, every show. Whose name came first? Whose picture was bigger? Who made the decisions?" Frank had no answer because they both knew the truth. "I want you to leave now," Dean said quietly. Frank stood there for a long moment, looking around the room as if he were seeing it for the first time. "If I walk out that door, we're done. Forever." "We're already done, Frank. We were done the minute you called me begging like a child." Frank Sinatra, the man who had faced down mobsters and presidents, who had conquered every stage in America, walked to the door with his head down like a beaten dog. His shoulders slumped with the weight of 40 years of friendship crashing down around him. He had come expecting forgiveness, maybe even absolution. Instead, he had received the harshest truth of his life. He stopped in the doorway and turned back one last time, his face a mask of pain and disbelief. "I hope you can live with this, Dean. I hope you can live with destroying the best thing we ever had." Dean took a sip of his drink and looked his former best friend in the eye with the cold finality of a judge delivering a death sentence. "I already am." Frank left and never came back. They would see each other at industry events, nod politely across crowded rooms, maintain the illusion of civility for the cameras. But they never spoke again. Not really. Not as friends. The silence between them became louder than any song they had ever sung together. Mia Farrow never came back either. She divorced Frank 6 months later and married someone else. Frank went through 2 more wives after that, always searching for something he couldn't name, always disappointed when he found it. The pattern never changed. Pursuit, conquest, possession, control, destruction. Dean Martin had finally told Frank Sinatra the truth. But the truth, as it often does, came at the cost of everything they had built together. The Rat Pack disbanded not with fanfare, but with whispered conversations and canceled engagements. The brotherhood ended not with a bang, but with the slow, sad recognition that some wounds never heal. And two men who had once conquered the world together spent the rest of their lives as strangers, haunted by the memory of what they had lost and the knowledge that it could never be recovered. Some friendships end with a bang, some end with a whimper, but the greatest friendship in entertainment history ended with a phone call at 3 in the morning and 4 words that changed everything. You made your bed.